What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Wildcat Dash here on Dash Sports TV. My name is Jacob Mennuti. I'm joined with my co-host Ryan Wohl. Ryan, how are we doing today?
Doing all right, but I know for sure that Sean Miller isn't doing great.
Yeah, terrible times to be an Arizona men's basketball fan right now. The women's team is doing well and showing out, having a good year, but not so much the men's team this year. The Wildcats lost another game last night to UCLA. That is now Arizona's fifth straight loss to the UCLA Bruins. Last time they beat them was way back in the 2018 Pac-12 championship game. So certainly some better times back then. That, of course, was the year of DeAndre Ayton. I think he had double-double, like 30-something in that game. Better times then. But last night's loss puts them back at 8-8 now in conference play. I think that ship of being the Pac-12 regular season champions have sailed. I think it's fair to say that. Just another rough loss last night, obviously. But I mean, why don't we get into breaking down this game a little bit here? What did you see from this game, Ryan?
I just saw a team that was totally overmatched and unprepared for that game, and it's crazy because it seems like it's just the same thing for the past 5 games about now. They play poor defense. They're a horrible 3-point shooting team, and it's just they don't have any go-to scorers. And the guys that we thought were on that level, some of them, they're not there yet. I mean, like Benedict Mathurin playing 27 minutes, 2 points, 4 rebounds. I mean, listen to this stat, and this is one of 2 reasons why I believe they haven't been winning basketball games. 3 players combined to shoot the ball 2 for 7 from the field. That's Koloko, Mathurin, and Kirk Kriisa. You can't have 3 starters, 2 for 7 from the field, and they combined for 8 points. That's not. I'm tired of all this stuff with Sean Miller saying, "Oh, Koloko, defense this, defense that." You still need production. I don't care. It's on any level of basketball. You need some sort of offensive scoring, production from your big man. And Mathurin, I think we got to take a step back with him. I mean, I don't think he's on that elite level as we thought for a few games. I still see the flashes, and he has that NBA body and that potential, but I think we got to slow the brakes down on him.
I think what I saw from this game is just that I think the game kind of proved to me that this team is just average. Like that's been the reality of this squad. I don't think anybody expected Arizona, to be winning the Pac-12 this season. I know we can sit here and tell ourselves that this team is underrated or that they're better than people think they are, but really this team is just average. I think 8-8 perfectly describes his squad. That's basically what Sean Miller was saying last night in the post-game press conference. Like, this UCLA team was just a really bad matchup for Arizona. I mean, you said they got physically outmatched. I totally agree. I think they got thumped the first time that they played each other, and then they did it again last night. There's just nobody on Arizona's roster that can guard Jaime Jaquez. Like, he seriously did not miss last night. And the Wildcats they just don't have anybody that can guard him. He just took over the game last night. It was simple as that. Like, Arizona, only has 2 true wing players, Dalen Terry and Benedict Mathurin, and neither one of them could stay in front of Jaquez last night. So, I mean, we can get into it later about, why this team is struggling so much and, why this team is only 8-8. But, so I'm not going to get into it now, but it's just what we've been seeing, like you said, the last 5 games or so. It's been the same story. This team is just average. They're better than ASU, so I mean we can always harp on that, but they're really just average. We've seen the same thing last night, which is the poor defense. Just foul trouble. We've seen it all before, right? And it was just another version of that game last night was what we've seen, a bunch of times before in this game or in this season.
Yeah, and as you said, average, and that's the best way to describe this team is average. They're all just average. I mean, the only guy that actually is the most consistent player, and I gave him the MVP award a few weeks ago for this team, is Jules Tabellas. I mean, last night again, 18 points, 8 rebounds, 8 for 12 shooting. He is the best player by far on this team and the most efficient player by far on this basketball team. And he's still keeping them alive. I mean, James Akinjo is just one of the most frustrating players, I've said it before, that I've ever watched in basketball. I mean, even last night, 21 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. but he was 6 for 14, 2 for 6 from three. He's a low. He's a low. He doesn't shoot as a high. He's not a high percent shooter, and it really hurts the team. And like off the bench, they really just get no production. I mean, they off the bench, they're bringing Jordan Brown at 6 points. Then you got Ira Lee only played 5 minutes. He had 0. Of course, it wouldn't have changed. I mean, Dalen Terry had 2, and then you got Terrell Brown who had 5. Dalen Terry is I just don't know what's wrong with him. I really think there's something wrong with him. I mean, he showed too much scoring potential in high school to really just fall off the cliff this quickly. And I still believe in him, and I still think he has some potential, but it's just this team they don't have any structure and they don't have any leadership. Like getting back to comparing it to last year's team, I feel like they just had better leadership and better veteran transfers. This year, I mean, like James Akinjo, it's basically like when he transferred from Georgetown, the thing was about him, like everyone criticized him, was he's a bad passer. He doesn't want to pass. He's a score-first player, and it's basically the same thing here. And that doesn't equal winning basketball. You could see it with guys in the NBA like Russell Westbrook and others, and that's not like wins don't translate to basketball being played that way.
This team just feels like it's kind of dying out as the season goes, right? Like they just look like they didn't want it last night, and that's something that we've seen a couple of times over the last 5 games, like you've said. Like Arizona is just didn't show up last night again. They were, we've seen it before. They get lazy and they just get bullied around. Like the rebounding for me, I think, was what frustrated me last night. And, UCLA just looked better inside against Arizona, which is actually weird because the stats don't really show it. I think Arizona actually out-rebounded UCLA by 1, and they had, I think 8 offensive rebounds or something like that. But it just didn't look like it, right? Like I counted way too many times last night where, the Wildcats had an inside position and they went up to go grab a board, but they somehow, some UCLA players somehow got it instead because they just out-hustled them for the rebound. Like Arizona just got physically outmatched last night, and that's been the common thing that we've seen here recently. They got bodied last night. They got bodied against Oregon last week too. Like, I don't know. It's just, not having Ira Lee for that, stretch there, I think hurt them a little bit, but I just don't know. I think Arizona is a good enough rebounding team to not be having nights like these. We've seen it before. Arizona statistically used to be one of the best rebounding teams in the conference. They were I think they had that stretch where they didn't, lose a rebounding battle. Like this is a good team, a good rebounding team when it wants to be. I just don't know what it is with them right now. It could just be the lack of effort, maybe the physical toll of the season is just finally catching up with them. I just don't know anymore, but this looks like a completely different squad than what we've seen a few months ago.
Yeah, and I think people mixed up the expectations of this team, and that's kind of why some people are frustrated, including myself. I mean, when coming into the year, I think they were ranked maybe at 7 or 6 projected according through a lot of websites, Pac-12 in the Pac-12 rankings. And then in the season, they were in the top 3 to 4 for the first few months and then fell off. But that's really, they're getting back to what people expected, and maybe they're playing even a little worse. But, I mean, this team, I do feel for the players, the coaches. I mean, because I do believe that it probably is. I'm not going to leave them all off the hook. I'll get into Sean Miller a little later. But it probably is a difficult task to motivate a team that really has nothing to play for, and they haven't had anything to play for the whole season. So for older players on the team, it's probably tough to overcome that, and they're probably frustrated about that and frustrated when that announcement happened.
So why don't we get to the bottom of this, right? Like this team is average and they've been playing it but why is that, right? Like Arizona is not playing up to the standards of Arizona basketball this season. So, I mean, what do you think it is, Ryan? Why is this team struggling so much?
There's 2 things, and I've been saying these 2 things. I've said it on past shows, and I'll say it once again. Number 1, they do not have a go-to scorer that you can rely on late in games, and it's hurt them as recently in the Oregon game. And then number 2, they're a horrible shooting team, period. 3-point, that's where they struggle the most. But overall, they're iffy in most games. Foul shots, or they struggle there most games. Some games they shoot the ball well, but the most part, looking at the broad view of this season, they're just horrible at shooting the basketball. And I would say, I mean, the one good part about James Akinjo, which I do like that he does, and I do respect it, is when nobody wants to take the shot, he wants to take the shot, and because nobody else does. Terrell Brown never wants to shoot the ball. Dalen Terry is basically just having a dude with I don't know what is wrong with him. He's a zero out there. There's no point to even give him any minutes at this point. And Tabellis isn't a reliable 3-point shooter. He's good inside. Mathurin, some games looks like the best shooter, and then looks atrocious. So those are the two key things, and it keeps getting back to them every single game and eating them alive.
I think for me, it's the defense. That's the short and simple answer, honestly. This team has been historically bad on defense this year. Every night, it just feels like the opposing team is shooting 70 or 80% in the second half, and they literally just don't miss. UCLA shot, I think, 73% from the field in the second half last night. An average Utah team did the same thing to Arizona a few weeks back. It's just been a consistent play of bad defense, and it's a real shame because while I agree with you to an extent that this team is not a very good shooting team, but this is still a good enough offensive team. This is I think, in my opinion, more than average offensive team, in my opinion. So none of that matters because this team can't get a stop on defense. It's so bad. Arizona, goes on these runs sometimes where they just can't score a bucket if their life depended on it, right? And it happened last night. They went 6 minutes without, scoring a point, and that was the game right there. Scoring droughts happen, right? That's common for any team, but the ways you overcome scoring droughts and offensive struggles is on defense. And Arizona is just not getting stops on defense. They're not getting it at all. They're not getting it when they need it the most. They're just digging themselves a hole every time they go on these offensive slumps because, it's gotten to the point where it's just if this team doesn't score a point, you're basically down 2 or 3 points because they're going to score on the other end of the court. This team is just not good enough on defense to balance out its scoring droughts right now. It's tough to see.
Yeah, and along with that, getting back to a little bit of the scoring struggles, and just the offense as a whole, it's, first of all, they don't have a dominant big man, obviously, and if you don't have a dominant big man, you need to make up for that in other places, and they just don't. They don't have any guy that's a knockdown shooter. I mean, I'm not even going to, anything Kurz did this year is a bonus. Nobody, some people didn't even know if he was going to play this year. And I believe he's 18 years old, very young, still has a lot to grow and a lot to learn. But he's not an elite shooter right now. And then it just seems like all the guards, basically besides Akinjo, they're not shooters. And you can't they just have too many guys that are ball handlers, point guards. And it just gets back to what I've said in the past. It's just I feel like it's a bad mix of talent, Do you agree?
Yeah, I think part of this struggles is the youth of this team. I think Arizona's best players are all freshmen and sophomores, and that's a tough dynamic for a team. When you're depending on 18 and 19-year-olds to carry your squad, right? That. That was honestly part of the reason why last year's team wasn't that good either. When the 3 freshmen struggled, it was game over, right? It's honestly, I feel like this is what we should have expected from this team, right? This is what we all wanted, right? No more 5-star recruits, no more one and dones. We were begging for more 3 or 4 year players. These are your 3 to 4 year players right here on this team. They're on this team right now. I think we have to kind of chill out for a second and remember that these players, who play in college for 4 years, they don't typically have a good freshman season. And honestly, almost all of 3 or 4 year players don't even break out to their junior or senior year. So I don't think it's fair for us to expect Benedict Mathurin to score 30 points a night for the next 3 years in Tucson, right? That's just not happening. This team is the epitome of a work in progress. Consistency is the key to this team's success. So there's going to be some growing pains, right? I think Dalen Terry has potential. I just think they're using him wrong. We can get into that later. But I think there's just a lot of, untapped potential on this squad, and we've seen it, right? I think especially with no postseason action this year, I think this season is all about improvement. And while I agree that this team doesn't feel like it's progressing in the right direction, from a game to game standpoint, I still think that there's a lot of raw potential in some of these players. Mathurin is a stud, right? We've seen him ball out and do his thing before. Azuolas Tubelis is a good player. We've seen him do it before. We've seen flashes of Koloko. We've seen Kurt Kriesla have a good game or two. Jordan Brown from time to time. I mean, even James Akinjo, we've seen him light the games up before. Like, we've seen these guys do stuff sometimes. So, like, the potential is there. And Sean Miller keeps stressing that, patience is going to be, the key to this team. And that's the new philosophy of recruiting for him right now. So it's annoying for us to watch right now. But I think, there is an opportunity for this team to function like a well-oiled machine. We just got to be patient with it. But I do agree. I think, we do need to hold this team accountable to some extent, right? Like, they're not progressing. It doesn't look like they're getting better game to game, right? Like we just said, it looks like, they're getting gas at the end of the season right now. So there's still, we still need to hold them accountable. But I think we need to all remember that this is the recruiting, this is the philosophy that we bought into, right? This is what we were excited about going into the season, as, these guys are going to be here for 3 or 4 years. They're going to be really good. Maybe not right now, but they'll be good in a few years, right? So I don't think it's fair for us to, expect Benedict Mathurin to be dropping 30 points every night and just be here for the next 3 years. Because once you have a good year as a freshman, you're gone, right? Like, so I think it needs to be assumed that there was going to be some growing pains with this team, and we're certainly seeing some growing pains with this team.
Yeah, and as you getting back to a little bit of your comparison of this year's team and last year's team, is last year's team those three like highly recruited players, they had the expectations coming in, so that's why people got frustrated with that team. These players, none of them had those high expectations. Like, all these players they're four. I believe they have 6 4-star players. They're a 4-star is a very high recruit, but it's not on that 5-star, one and done, every game matters type of mentality. So I think that's where it differs, and it's just crazy to look at. If you're looking at the season as a whole and just standing back and like watching and rewatching some of the games, it's like Benedict Mathurin has had multiple 20-point games. Like, nobody even thought Benedict Mathurin, he didn't even start the year. He wasn't even a starter. Azuolas Tubelis wasn't even a starter on this team. So, yeah, so you do got to put it in perspective, but I think it's time to get into Sean Miller a little bit. And the one thing that I wanted to get into is a quote that he said after the Oregon loss. And he said, I have to be better. I have to be better late in games. And the question that brings that up and comes to my mind is, and I would say, when do you get better late in games? This is his 13th year in Arizona. So if 13 years is enough, what do you need? Another 13? So when do you actually start to figure it out late in games? I'm not saying not every coach obviously is on that championship level that is going to compete at the top of the top level every year. And I don't think Sean Miller is that coach and will get to that level. But to say that it just doesn't make sense. I know it's frustrating, but like, when do you figure it out? That's what I would say. Like, he's had so many great recruiting classes and just never can get it right. And it's not to be like, chokes in the Final Four, chokes in the championship. You're choking in the first round with DeAndre Ayton. Like that's the type of stuff that just boggles my mind. Like, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I'm not ready to give up on Sean Miller yet, but I do think he has a lot to be held accountable for. Like, this team really hasn't been elite in 3 or 4 years now. And it's not like, we had that good recruiting class last year. And part of that was, with the ESPN scandal, and that kind of ruined the recruiting class a little bit too. But the talent is there on this team. So, like, you start looking around and it's like, who do you blame, right? Well, it's like, you had a team with DeAndre Ayton and Alonzo Trier and Raleigh Hawkins. That team was loaded, and they got bounced in the first round. Like, what the heck was that about? Like, this team, hasn't been in the NCAA tournament in a few years. Like, it's just like, Arizona, the expectations need to be there, and he has the tools to, make these runs in the NCAA tournament. But I don't know. I just think I'm not quite ready to give up on him yet, because I think this new, recruiting philosophy that, he's, just now started to really buy into this year of, building up